Hello, everyone. Today's video is going to be about pitfalls in the, or potential pitfalls in the ILAAP and ICAAP process. ICAAP, the Capital Adequacy Assessment Process, and been around since Basel II, so it's been around for a while. And ILAAP, the Liquidity Adequacy Assessment Process, which is undertaken by just about every bank in the world and submitted to their regulatory authority for review and approval. This is something that was requested of me by a number of correspondents. What are the sort of pitfalls to avoid when undertaking the ICAAP and the ILAAP process? Now, let's spend 10 minutes or so chatting about that. Before I talk about pitfalls, and by the way, I've got lots of experience in from the start. The first time I was involved in was back in 2006 at what was called KBC Financial Products. But then subsequently at different banks being involved in the drafting it or the stress testing part. And then later on, as one becomes more senior, reviewing it, submitting it for approval or to the board and then to the regulator, or indeed presenting it to the regulatory authority. So I've been involved in different stages of both those over the years. Now, before I get into the potential pitfalls, the first thing I'd like to say is the regulator is really interested in the numbers. The regulator is interested in seeing the current balance sheet, whether we're talking about capital or liquidity adequacy, and then seeing what happens to that balance sheet when one applies three different stress scenarios to it. And they're interested in the numbers. The numbers are here in a business as usual, a stable environment, and the number looks like this when I've applied the stress test. Is that the number I'm happy with? And is that the number they're happy with? So, and that's a direct quote, by the way, from a senior person at the UK regulator at a conference last year, 2024. I was at the Building Society Association conference on a panel. And there was a lady there from the PRA, and that's a direct quote. We're interested in the numbers. So we should always remember that when we are undertaking the process and drafting it, and drafting the actual document and then going through the process of review and challenge and approval. They're interested in the numbers. They want to see that the numbers, your output, demonstrate that the balance sheet is resilient for either capital or liquidity under three hypothetical stress conditions. Okay, so potential pitfalls. Let's try and first one. Let's try and cease the page inflation that has been a feature of ICAAPs and ILAAPs, but certainly ICAAPs. Well, yes, for many years now. Each year, you could be the biggest bank in the world or the smallest in just about any country. And each year, this year's ICAAP or ILAAP is 20, 30 pages longer than last year's one. And if you think about it, that carries on every year. You end up with what we observe today, 300-400-page ICAAP documents, even for comparatively small banks. Now, I know for a fact that the supervision teams in many countries, they're actually looking for shorter documents. They would prefer succinct documents that concentrate on the numbers. So the first thing to watch out is continual page inflation. Let's try and see if we can, rather than adding 20 pages this year, maybe we could take 20 pages off and get back to how long they used to be back in the day when I used to do them before the crash. Next, the technical detail. Be really aware of the accuracy of the technical data. The supervision teams who review ICAAPs really get into the detail. The risk weightings for exactly every nuance of product that you have, the risk weightings that you're using. Obviously, if it's a standardized approach you're using, then these are given to you by guidance. If it's your own internal model, really watch the technical detail. Really watch the assumptions behind the calculations. State clearly what the assumptions are that drive the analysis. Okay, so be mindful of real accuracy in the technical data, and state clearly what assumptions are made when you are saying here is what we're doing, here's what we're using. The real meat and drink of the ICAAP is the stress test. That's really what the document is all about. That was its original intent. I mean, originally there was no reason that an ICAAP didn't have to be more than 30 pages, let alone 300. But the real meat and drink of both of them is the stress scenario and the impact of each of those. So, orthodox approach, we are obliged to apply a market-wide stress, a firm-specific stress, or idiosyncratic. Some people use that term, and combined market-wide and firm-specific. So three different stress scenarios, and spend some time on the storyboard. Spend some time. By that I mean the assumption, the description, the description of the set of affairs, the set of circumstances that resulted in a stress event taking place. Okay, so describe not so describe because of such X, Y, and Z happening. We've had greater impact on capital loss for this, that, and other reasons. It could be an operational risk scenario. It could be the good old-fashioned default risk increase and defaults, credit risk increases. It could be a combination of the two. But spend some time on coming up with the storyboard that drives the stress, and treat the three of them separately. And again, this is my next point. You've got three stress events, three storyboards. That means you've got three sets of management actions. Don't have, which we used to do back in the old day, but today I don't think it's quite fit for purpose. Have a set of management actions that are relevant to that stress event, and they should be tailored to reflect the fact that in a stress scenario, what you might expect to, how you might expect a management action, the actions that you take to restore the balance sheet to health, the actions that you take, you might expect them to be different in their implementation or their impact or the output of those, the result of applying those actions, depending on the stress event. And that's perfectly logical. If we're in a market-wide stress event, a kind of Lehman's 2008 scenario, or something like that, or a very significant recessionary environment in the country that you're operating in, then we'd expect well, not every bank, but many of the banks to be in the same boat, the same position. So what you do as a management action may well be different and have a different impact than if it was just your firm in the stress, the firm-specific stress. So three different stress scenarios, three different sets of management actions, and I like to think that we should lay them out in the order we'd expect to implement them in a stress. Now, this sounds a little bit contrived. In fact, it is a bit contrived because you've got a hypothetical situation and you're saying in your document, here is what I'm going to do in this order based on this hypothetical situation. It's a little bit contrived, but again, just making a set of assumptions, determine which you would apply first, and then state them in that order. Remember, we're always going to be interested in doing the low-hanging fruit, the easy management actions, the easy remediation actions to follow rather than the harder ones. Sometimes I see management actions that say things like sell part of the business, divest a division, do a rights issue, ask for more capital from shareholders. These things, take time, and they're not necessarily easily pulled off in a stress event, particularly if it's firm specific. The one I always find amusing is in an ILAAP, the Liquidity Adequacy Assessment, and you've got a firm specific stress scenario, and one of the management actions is undertake securitization. Securitization transactions take a few weeks at least, if not a few months. The quickest one I was ever involved with took 3 months, and that was during a healthy BAU, business as usual environment. Securitizations aren't really responses to a liquidity stress event, particularly if it's firm specific. To suggest that, we'll do a securitization is not really feasible or realistic under certain circumstances. In fact, in today's environment, in 2025, drawing on our lessons from Silicon Valley Bank and First Republic, etc., in 2023, in today's environment, in an ILAAP stress, we'd probably be really interested in a very high impact, unexpected, so low probability, high impact, very immediate, heavy impact liquidity stress. So what is our response in the first 3, 5, 7 days rather than the next 90 days? Because we're either, if we survive the first 2, 3, 4, 5 days of a outflow of funds from our bank, a deposit run, a bank run, then we're probably going to be okay. If we don't survive the first 2 or 3, 4, 5 days, well, then it doesn't really matter what happens because we've not survived it. Okay, a couple of other things just on this pointers thing as well, I'd say, concerns two things that was in the original Basel II guidance. One is called the use test, and one is called the review and challenge. The use test refers to the fact that the supervision authority doesn't want the ICAAP or the ILAAP to be some bureaucratic tick box exercise. You go through it, you approve it, you get it approved by the regulator, you file it away till next year. They want it to be used as part of the strategic decision making process of the business. Whether or not it actually is used like that, one needs to demonstrate that it is. I'm hoping that it is used like that in all the banks that I'm talking to now. So think of a way how you're going to demonstrate that this process, whether it's the ICAAP or the ILAAP, is actually used in the business. The process of undertaking the stress test, understanding the balance sheet, how that would feed into decision making if we're going to introduce a new product, or maybe expand into another country, or expand our customer franchise into a new type of customer, or something large or something not so large. how do we make use of the ICAAP and the ILAAP in our decision making? So the use test, and then document that so you can demonstrate that in the submission. And then the final point I would talk about, a potential pitfall, is the extent of board review and challenge. Now, the original Basel guidance, this has been repeated by the PRA, the ECB, the EBA, a number of other authorities around the world, regulators around the world. This original guidance, which is still being emphasized and focused on today, is that the ICAAP and the ILAAP are board-owned documents. The process and the submission are meant to be something that the board has bought into. They understand. They're approving it. They're saying, this is our ICAAP. Here you go. Please approve it. So the board needs to get involved in that review and challenge process earlier on, rather than just at the end when the final document is ready for submission to the regulator. So the review and challenge process means have a documented, efficient, but high-level process whereby the output, the draft report, the stress scenarios, the interpretation of the output of the stress tests, they are reviewed at the sufficiently high level, including up to board, which means that during the process, the board of directors gets involved more than once when it's between the start and the finish, rather than just at the end. So that's another potential pitfall as well. So there may well be more, but this is just meant to be a short video. So these are potential pitfalls in the process of the ICAAP and the ILAAP. I hope that's been of use. Of course, we could talk for a lot longer about this, but that's probably for another video. Thanks very much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.